Hi guys, Goffy here. It's been a busy week and I've not been able to get outside too much, so instead of shooting a video out in the field, I thought I'd do a little video on how to get the most out of your Fuji X100V. This is a camera that out of the box comes with some pretty bizarre settings, so you have to go in and change them if you want to get the most out of this camera. There's going to be a few sections to this video. We're going to have a section to begin with about the settings of the camera. We're then going to have a little bit of a talk about the handling. We're then going to move on to the Fuji Emulations, and we're going to finish briefly talking about the flash. There's going to be some timestamps on the screen about now, so if you want to hop to certain sections, feel free. I do, however, want to thank some of you guys, because you guys have come in really helpful recently down in the comments, and you pointed out some of the ways that I could get more out of this camera, and some of those are going to be mentioned in this video. So let's jump into the settings. First up, this camera comes with a leaf shutter. It's one of the major selling points, and I imagine a lot of people buy this camera for that feature. So then, why, by default, does this camera make a shutter sound through the speaker when you take a photo? One of the main things about having a leaf shutter is that it is dead quiet. Thankfully though, it is quite easy to do this. Head to the setup page, then go sound setup, shutter volume, and turn that off. You'll then notice that your camera is an awful lot quieter. Let's have a little talk about focusing. There's a setting that I turn on straight away, and I've done this on previous cameras too. There is a setting called AF plus MF. What this enables you to do is when you half press the shutter, it will autofocus, but it will then let you override the autofocus with the wheel on the lens, giving you that extra little bit of precision with your shot, especially if it's something a little bit precise that you want to focus on. To do that, if you head to the second page of the autofocus settings, you will see the AF plus MF there, and you want to switch this feature on. Now, if you are using manual focus a lot with this camera, you're probably going to want to turn on focus peaking. This on the Fuji system is called manual focus assist. It's on the same place as the previous settings, so it's on the second page of the autofocus settings, and on here you'll see MF assist. I personally prefer the red setting, as I feel like red contrasts really well, and you rarely ever have any red in your image. Now, when you are focusing using this little wheel on the front, you'll see the red focus peaking, and it'll help you nail what's in and out of focus. Another setting that I change is the focus or release priority, and what this enables you to do is tell the camera whether you want it to focus before taking the image or whether you just want it to take the photo the second you press the shutter. Now thankfully Fuji offer this in two different ways, so there's a different setting for your single shot autofocus and your continuous shot autofocus. I personally with single shot like to let it focus first before taking the image, as I find these sort of situations are going to be slightly more controlled anyway, and I'd rather it nailed the focus. But when I'm in autofocus continuous, I actually just want it to take the photo the second I press the shutter, regardless of whether it's obtained focus or not. Now to do this, it's still on that same page, so it's in the autofocus settings on page 2, and it's the bottom setting. Like I said, I have the single shot at the top, I have that on focus priority, and I have my autofocus continuous set on release priority. This gives them the two different behaviors depending on what autofocus mode I'm in. Another feature that I'm not a fan of with this camera is the touch screen. By default, when you touch the screen, it takes an image, and I've found myself taking so many photos by accident where I've been accidentally touching the screen. So I actually just turn off all touchscreen settings, but you can, if you want, change it so that it just, when you tap on the screen, it will autofocus at the point you press, but not release the shutter. To do this, you want to head to page 3 of the autofocus settings, go down to touchscreen mode, and I turn mine off, but you might want to put yours onto the focus setting. Last of all, with the settings, and this one is pretty deep into the settings too, I really like having a histogram on my live view and on my EVF. And by default, this camera doesn't come with one switched on. To turn this on, you do have to go quite deep into the settings. It's in setup, screen setup, display, custom settings, EVF and LCD, and then select the histogram tick box, and that will always be on your EVF and your LCD. So away then from the settings of this camera, there's a few of the physical controls that I don't think are very intuitive out of the box. In my previous video, I mentioned that the shutter dial on the top of the camera, when you're looking through the viewfinder, is quite hard to turn as it's quite stiff. And I've also got a thumb grip on my camera, which means it's even harder to get to that shutter speed dial. But however, somebody down in the comments pointed out that if you turn your shutter speed to the T mode, it then enables you to use the little dial on the back, which is a lot easier to scroll with to control your shutter speed, and I find this an awful lot easier to use. Next up, this camera comes with a lovely little ND filter built in, and it's a bit of a nightmare if you go through the menu settings trying to find it. Yet again, another person in my comments pointed out that the little EVF live view toggle on the front, if you hold that to the right for a few seconds, it will actually engage the ND. And again, if you want to turn your ND off, you just have to hold it for a few seconds again and it will switch it off. So much easier than going through the menu settings. I also find that the joystick on this camera is a little bit annoying too, as it protrudes from the camera body. And because it sticks out from the camera body, I find that when I wear this camera around my neck, that my body knocks against this joystick and then moves my focus patch around, so when I go to take a photo, I end up having to reset my focus patch first. All you have to do is head to Setup, Button Dial Settings, Focus Lever Settings, and change it to Push to unlock. This also enables another handy feature where if you double tap the joystick, it will reset your focus patch to the center. Now, away from the controls of this camera, we're going to move on to the Fuji Emulations. Now, one of the main reasons I bought this camera was because the Fuji Emulations are so good. But there is a problem, and that is that they're so good that there's more than one of them that I like, and sometimes it's really hard to decide which one to use. Now, Fuji has you covered with film bracketing. Exactly like exposure bracketing, where exposure bracketing takes multiple pictures, film emulation bracketing takes multiple photos with different emulations. So you can set up to 3 different ones that when you fire the shutter, it will save you 3 different JPEGs on 3 different settings. Now, to pick which 3 emulations you want to use, you need to go to Shoot Settings, Film Simulation Bracket, and choose the 3 that you'd like. Then to actually enable this mode when shooting, you need to press the Drive Delete button, go down to Bracket and select Film Bracketing. And now when you take a photo, it will actually save you 3 different JPEGs, each with a different emulation turned on. Beyond the film emulations that come as standard, Fuji offer you so many different JPEG settings that there are some websites out there that have different Fuji emulation recipes to try and emulate different films. Some like Kodak Portra and some like Kodachrome. A website that I found that is really good for this is Fuji Weekly, where you can even pick your sensor, and then they have a whole list of different film emulations, which you can then plug these settings into your camera and give them a go. If you head to the 3rd page at the image quality section, then go down to Edit, Save Custom Settings, select a setting in here to overwrite by selecting on Edit, and then copy the settings off the website. Like I said, Fuji Weekly is a really good one for this, but I'm sure there are plenty more out there too. If you know any more good ones, I would love to hear them down in the comments. I found these to be an awful lot of fun, not just using other people's, but also making some of my own. I did a video a little while ago where I tried the Fuji X100V's Acros setting against real life Acros. I found there was a little bit of a difference, so I've gone in and tweaked some of the settings to try and make the emulation just that little bit closer. Using other people's also helped me to understand what all of the settings in there do, as some of them might not be immediately obvious, but once you've had a play with other people's presets, you start to realise what they do and how to make the most of them. Now, last up, something that I've been experimenting with a little bit recently is the flash on the front of this camera. It's quite easy to forget a camera like this even has a flash, but because of that awesome leaf shutter, you get some really quick flash sync speeds, and that means this camera can do things that some cameras can't. Now, one of those and one that I've been experimenting with is on really bright sunny days where you get sort of like really dark shadows on people's faces, using this as a fill flash. So I've been turning on the ND filter, then shooting wide open with the flash on. That's something that so many cameras cannot do very easily, but this little guy can do it, and I'm having an awful lot of fun experimenting currently with this as a fill flash. I think I probably need to do a whole nother video on messing around with the flash settings, but don't forget this camera has one and have a little bit of an experiment. So hopefully guys, I hope this video has given you just 1 or 2 tips that maybe you've not heard of or maybe you'd forgotten about that you can put into your camera to just try and get a little bit more out of it. This camera, like I said at the start, comes with some pretty bizarre settings out of the box, and until you change some of these settings, you're not getting the most out of your camera. These settings though are my settings. They might not be the perfect settings for you, but hopefully it's just given you a few ideas. If you've enjoyed this video and you like Fuji content or film photography content, please consider liking and subscribing and following along. There's plenty more content like this coming. Thank you for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!